Hello, my name is Irene Viglia Atton. I am a mentor and international speaker, and I facilitate a work called Heart Leadership. I run group trainings and one-to-one sessions to guide my clients to find their own inner heart leader in accordance to their life purpose. In my work, I combine the science of the heart and the power of imagination and dreams in a specific way through an internal exploration of the self. Each manifestation of our life starts with a form that we hold inside in a specific place within the body called the subconscious or unconscious, as many define it. Leadership starts from within ourselves, and each one of us is a leader of their own life, family, household. So it does not really matter what we do in life. We are all here as leaders of our own everyday activities. Now, are we fully aware of how we lead? What is the inner image that shapes our outer reality in life? How can we be in charge of that inner form? Do we fully walk the talk in line with our life purpose? One of the key elements in heart leadership is the capacity actually to take charge of emotions and transform them where needed into positive feelings. And that gives us access to a much wider perspective of leadership that we might not even have right now, putting us in a position of confidence and safety for ourselves and those around us that we lead. Not always people know and understand the power of emotions and what an important key they are for our inner evolution and expansion. Once we decide to take charge and do something with those emotions instead of letting them run us, life changes and leadership changes. And why leading from the heart, you might wonder? And why not? I dare to respond. In the end, the heart is formed in the mother's womb before there is a brain. And it is actually the last organ to switch off at the time of death. It is also scientifically researched that the heart is the place where our intuition originates from. So being heart focused has a powerful effect in leading life. Let's explore this together, as I am sure there will be plenty of opportunity to speak more about this during the time of the book fair. I look forward to seeing you all there. Take care for now. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to the RV Book Fair. My name is Lucia Matuonto and I'm excited to welcome you back to the RV Book Fair 2024. So today I'm thrilled to have my co-host Sean Bridges joining us. Sean is a talented screenwriter and novelist and my co-host also on Carpooling with the RV. So thank you, Sean, for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad to be part of the relatable media and everything that you do. This is a perfect place to be. I'm glad to really get a chance to talk to these guests. I was looking forward to it, so I'm very happy to be here.
Me too. Thank you.
So let's see. Today we welcome two incredible authors. First, we have Janet Kravetz, an award-winning writer and author of Sky Curse. Am I saying your name correctly? I apologize about that if I'm not. Oh, perfect. So welcome, Janet. I'd like to hear more about your novel if we could.
Yeah, Sky Curse is a dystopian novel, but it's all about bringing hope to humanity. It's set in mostly in the US in the year 2045, when humanity is on the brink of collapse. There's environmental disasters happening one after another, And society is split into two groups. One is the universalists, and another one is the localists. And the universalists want to escape to other planets, to space, while taking advantage of all the resources of Earth. And the localists that are mainly based in Canada, they want to save Earth without using too much technology. So that's the setting for Sky Curse.
Mhm.
And the protagonist is Cecilia Miller. She's a dream engineer. She's also a cyborg woman, which means that she has an implant that helps her connect better with machines. And she's a dream engineer, so she helps other cyborgs, which are most of the Americans in 2045 in Sky Curse. She helps
Now too,
them
actually.
visualize digital experiences in their dreams to a point that it feels real. So
So
that's the setup
we
for
are
Sky
not that
That's great,
far away.
Lucia.
Yeah. And next we have Gary Morgenstein. Gary is an award-winning playwright and author of Amount Over Hell. So Gary, welcome to the Relatable Voice Book Fair.
Thank you for having me on. This is delightful. I've written 7 novels, including most recently my dystopian trilogy, which begins with A Mound Over Hell, A Fastball for Freedom, and then A Dugout to Peace. And it starts in 2098 after America and the West have lost World War III to the Islamic Empire. So the United States is surrounded. Democracy is dead. We're run by an entity called the family, whose leader is grandma. And through all this, baseball is disgraced, discredited for being part of the old America, the failed great American superpower. And baseball is about to begin its final season ever at Amazon Stadium, which is formerly named Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, where the seat of government actually has moved after Washington was nuked. And it's about unlikely, sometimes reluctant heroes, ordinary people who do extraordinary things, who inevitably save the world. And it's through, they do it in part through baseball, but it's an adventure, it's a love story, but it's also going to what Janet has said, it's hope. And I think in these times, when you write dystopian, you're not really predicting. I mean, Janet and I could, both address that. There's no current political sentiment in my novel. There's nothing about Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, nothing about that. But I think with dystopia, what you try to do is not be predictive, but have the reader understand, well, yes, this is possible. Mm-hmm. This is viable. This could happen. So, for example, America, losing its will to fight, losing its will for freedom, losing a world war to the Islamic Empire. And I think that's really important. So my book is dark. It's got a lot of humor. It's got a lot of action. But ultimately, you have to give a way forward to the reader and to the audience, with screenwriters, plays. You just can't harangue. You just can't give them, oh my God, it's horrible. What's going to happen? You have to illuminate a way so that there is something to hold on to, some hope. It doesn't have to be, everyone holding hands in a circle singing, because that's not reality and you don't want to insult their intelligence. But you have to show that there's a possibility to a better world.
Yes.
I always thought if you wrote interesting characters, you could create any world you can come up with, and the audience is willing to go along with it. So yeah, I love that. That's interesting. That I could see that going down that rabbit hole of but having hope and keeping things alive, really. And then Janet, could you talk a little bit about yourself and your journey as a writer?
Yeah, I was writing since I remember myself, before I could write. So it all started in Ukraine in the 80s, early 80s, former Soviet Union, where my sister was reading books to me, and I would love to think with her about how to make another book like that, like, a sequel to this book, or imagine a different ending. And I always wanted to write. So my life journey was interesting. I lived in a few countries. I was exposed to many cultures and languages. And my journey as a writer in English started when I immigrated to Canada in 2009. And shortly thereafter, I started writing in English. I published a poetry book in 2012, Reaching Beyond Ourselves, Leading a Spiritual, Peaceful, and Diverse World. And that led me to writing dystopian novels, because I thought if we want peace and diversity and spirituality, we need to think about other things like sustainability. And I'm thinking about dual sustainability in terms of environment, but also technological AI sustainability.
Mhm.
And all that is in Skycurse, The Chosen Five, my dystopian novel.
And also, as Gary was telling us, I think that the dystopian literature can be a powerful call to action, yes, urging readers to critically examine their world and advocate for positive change before it's too late. I don't know about 2098, yes, Gary, but in 2048, we still have hope. Yes, kind of hope.
Well, and you know, as Sean said, it's about the characters. There's no CGI in novels, thank God, right? we can't fall back on technology to show something instead of plot, instead of character development, instead of dialogue, as they can in the movies and in a little lesser degree, but somewhat in television. So it's really, you know, it's more naked and it's more, I always like to think I write plays as well. And but it's kind of similar to novels, that the readers are eavesdropping. And you have to show them, you have to be honest with your stories and with your readers. I don't think you should ever talk down to them. I don't think you need to put the scroll, this is the bad guy, this is the good girl, this is, let them decide. All too often you see in writing the writer's avatar. It has it's all about the agenda. It's all about making the point. And obviously for thousands of years, that's what writers have done, because we're different with kind of the other. We see the world differently. So we've held up a mirror to society and say, well, this is wrong. What are you going to do about it? But it has to be within the context of people, not speeches. And you have to be willing to show people, even the ones who you disagree with, and let them speak for themselves and not draw conclusions for the reader. I mean, there's many things. I've had characters who I have total disdain, even the ones I like. I say, did you just do that? Come on. But that's not up to me to decide. When I have plays and there's a talkback, for example, and someone will ask, well, why did your character do that? I said, well, why do you think? I've done my job. Now you're the one who has to think, right? Don't. This is on me. I'm done. I'm tired. You have to.
The bad guy never thinks he's bad. I guess there's never the villain never thinks they're doing anything wrong. They're actually there's a point to what they're doing.
Exactly.
Is this a genre you like to work in? Is this something that you like? Dystopian fiction, is this something that you really kind of enjoy coming back to? I do a lot of suspense thrillers. That's my kind of like comfort zone. Is dystopian fiction kind of a comfort for you, or do you really enjoy that kind of futuristic work?
Yes, because it gives you a lot of latitude, because you're not bound by anything. Again, and you, as Janet can talk about, we have to create our own worlds, and you can't. The readers will bust you if you're not true to your worlds. For example, in my novel, it's the family, and it's based on love and relationships, and there's no hyphenations. No one is judged on what they happen to be. You're just a person, okay? And it's kind of a benign dictatorship. And among the things they do there is that social media has been banned under the anti-narcissism laws, which isn't really a bad idea for 2024 if you think about it, okay? Mm-hmm. But it's because the world that I've created is based on true relationships. I don't want to depress anyone out there, but the 1,000 friends on Facebook really ain't your friends. Okay, that's get a life. That's not. So in this world, it has to be real relationships and people who really care about you and you have to make your own mind up your own mind. So there's no influences. There's no book reviewers, which may also not such a bad thing. And so, but that is true to the world of the society of my world. Those laws, not bringing it from elsewhere. I have to have things that make sense, and I think that's the trick in writing dystopian literature. Sometimes you say, "Oh, what did I do, schmuck? What?" I've just caused right, Jan. You caused a lot of problems.
It's world building, yeah. It's amazing world building. I mean, and Janet could probably chime in on this too. Janet, what makes you kind of fall into this world of dystopian fiction and find it fascinating and want to tell these stories?
I always liked the books of Jules Verne, and I like sci-fi, like a constructive dialogue sci-fi that brings us dreams or visions of the future. I never thought I'll write dystopian. The thing is that for many years, I worked as a professional researcher, and I'm used to reading a lot of news in a few languages from different countries and analyzing them. And I like reading policy papers about the future. So eventually, when I decided to write my first novel, it happened to be in the future because of all the stuff I'm exposed to in my way of thinking. And it was also easier to write it in the future because you don't know what's going to happen in a second, but you know probably what will happen in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years because all the news and the policy papers are talking about that. So it was an easier world to build, but it's funny because I sent it to my editor and I said, I wrote a thriller. And she said, no, you wrote sci-fi. And I said, why? Well, because it's set in the future. I said, well, does that matter? Because we're going to be there very, very soon. And she said, no, it's sci-fi. So I think I crossed all genres when I wrote it. There's a bit of romance, a bit of thriller, a bit of mystery, a bit of everything. Young adult.
It's funny sometimes with the publisher or the editor, it tells you kind of the genre, and you're like, oh, I wrote a political thriller, and I'm like, well, there's some of that in there. Like, no, that's a political thriller. So they kind of classify it. I could see that.
Yeah, they classify. And Gary, is there a favorite dystopian movies or novels that influenced or, let's say, inspired your writing?
Well, I love Philip K. Dick. And I love, if you want to talk about brilliant science fiction, he was back in the glory days of the 1950s and 60s when science fiction was considered pulp, when in fact you had some of the greatest trailblazing writers, Isaac Asimov and Ray Bradbury, and on and on, the golden era of science fiction. But he always had a society, a government that was intrusive. And he would do humor even among the darkness. And his characters were a little off. And they didn't know how they got there. And you think of all the movies like Blade Runner, for example, is, the Minority Report, on and on, the many Man in the High Castle on Amazon, when they took, they went well beyond it. So that inspired me. And also 1984. My trilogy has been called 1984 meets Shoeless Joe, because there is a blending, as you were talking about, a blending of genres, because it is a thriller. It is, but it also brings baseball. I think. Oh, oops. That's all right. Sorry. Technical error, user error. I must say that I'm not saying I'm the only dystopian baseball trilogy ever written, but I can't think of any others, because I take baseball and I use it as a metaphor, as for the heart of America, what America has lost, and trying to find its way back again. The thing about baseball is it is connective tissue. It goes back in the past, in the history and the generations, and it has magic numbers. And I don't want to insult any basketball or football fans out, the hockey fans, because I have respect for all sports, but it doesn't have the connection over time. There's numbers like 56, and 511, and on and on, all the great records. And you don't have that. I mean, could anyone I'm sure someone out there could tell me who's the leading passing yardage in football history? I guess it's Tom Brady. Does anyone know how many yards? Right, really? But baseball, and it's because it was America's pastime, and now it's not anymore, and it never will be again because you need to be sentimental to love baseball. You need to be able.
I can think of like Richard Matheson's short story "Steel" about robot boxing. I mean, you can kind of play with sports and
Yes.
future and dark worlds, and
yes,
I think it'll bring readers that maybe wouldn't go for a dystopian novel into. They would have more of a interest in picking that up because they're a boxing fan or a baseball fan or a football fan. So I can totally see that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Janet, what about you? Any particular dystopian stories you have that have shaped your work?
Like I said, I read a lot of Jules Verne when I was little, or even didn't read it, but my sister read it to me when I was very, very young. And that was the kind of genre I kept reading. I kind of just started learning about dystopian novels as I wrote one. But, I really enjoy watching the movies like The Last of Us, the TV show that I watched recently. But I'm exposing myself to a lot of genres, and every time I change what I write, sometimes it's poetry, sometimes it's novel, sometimes it's script, comedy. Yes. But what was very influential was the stories of possibilities in my childhood.
Yes, I personally don't like the problem is when I watch these futuristic movies or let's say sci-fi, I'm so afraid about the future. I feel a little bit depressed,
But we can shape it.
Yes. Yeah.
The future's in our hands.
Yes.
And there's always people going against the tide. I mean, Children of Men was all about that. And like, I think, I always go back to character, and I love dystopian worlds and futures. But yeah, if you, Shirley Jackson's The Lottery and The Road and what else? Escape from New York is probably my all-time favorite movies, but you're really looking at characters that are pushing against the system to make it work for them. So I've always been fascinated with dystopian fiction, but really interesting characters who are saying enough is enough or standing up and saying, no, I'm going to go a different way. And I think that's what really kind of brings, I don't know, just lifts a genre for me. But it's a character piece.
Always. Oh, I mean, look, we know the characters take over stories. It sounds very trippy. I went to college in the 70s, so maybe that accounts for saying that. But I know many writers believe that you'll write a scene and you'll say, oh, what crap. Who wrote that? And the characters will say, you really think I would have behaved like that? And you just let them take over. And I know it's, unless you're a writer or creative person, it's hard to convey, well, but wait, they're your characters. Well, after a while, they're not. And they take on lives of their own. And they have, I mean, I think one of the most wonderful things when you write is our characters who you never imagined being a great part, a component, a key figure in the story, springing to life. And oh, okay, you're here to stay. I mean, I'm not a very organized writer. My wife, years ago, I was working on my second novel. She created what she called a genius board, which I thank you, honey, but that's very sweet of you. And so and she put to cardboard like an accordion character. And I spent all afternoon writing on the Post-its all the scenes and all my ideas. I never looked at it again because I prefer to be, writing is hard enough. Okay, it's the endless editing, which people who don't write or just have general ideas for writing really don't get. It's hard work. My last novel was over 900 pages Word doc, and I've edited at least 10 times. I'm talking A to Z. But so you have to have the fun. I know where I'm going, but I don't know how I'm getting there. And that's the joy, right? That's the rush, which is indescribable, nothing like it.
I love that. Janet, could you talk a little bit about your future and the future that you created?
The future in Skykers, it's a very detailed future, and it's supposed to make people even laugh a little bit, although the future is a little bit, I call it a second after it's too late, but a minute before the world ends. So it's a world with a lot of opportunity, but you have environmental chaos. You have questions about AI. AI is seeking human rights already, and yet there are funny components there. And Gary was speaking about sports in the future, so I created unique sports in Skykers. It's called Holoball. And everybody play that, and it's equal for all because it's a hologram. So people of different abilities and different mindsets can all play together the game. And Skykers The Chosen Five is talking about 5 people who are individually selected by their skills to save the world through going through adventures, going to Mexico and finding Mayan crystals, and with those crystals they save the world. So one of them is Alex, and she's actually the inventor of that game, Holoball.
Wow.
So it's a very specific world, and everything there is very detailed. So I think it's an immersive world, and when you read the book, you feel like you're there.
Super. I love this. I love
Yeah, that's awesome.
playing games and like Hunger Games.
Yes.
I remember now. And Gary, your dystopian trilogy begins in 2098, as we said, talked before. So can you tell us a little bit more? I'm curious to know your idea about this world that will be in about 60 years from now. So please.
Well, the America that we knew and the world that we know is very changed. It's very different. America, there's nothing preordained about freedom. You have to fight for freedom. You have to believe in freedom. And it just doesn't come magic. It's not written down. There's nothing equally preordained about great nations surviving. Ask the ancient Greeks, the Romans, on and on. There's a long list of ancient great civilizations that no longer exist or exist as they once had because people did not pursue it. They lost their way. And I wanted to do a story about America having lost its way. And I did not, I could have done, something environmental or some catastrophic incident from space. But I thought, okay, America, what is the greatest gut punch? America loses World War III. And I thought, okay, to who would we lose it to? And well, Russia has been done before, Red Dawn and everything. It's not, that's been done. You could say the Chinese, but that's pretty boring. But when you talk about the confrontation between Islam and the West, that's been going on for about 1,300 years. It's still going on. In fact, America's first foreign war America ever fought was against the Barbary pirates during the Jefferson administration. It's where the Marine hymn came from, the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. I mean, that's where it started, and we see today what's going on. And I thought, well, you have the culture clash. You have something that people could understand, but now you have two sides hardened by World War III and by America losing. And how do you get past that? Now, there are hardliners on both sides, but as the book starts, there are people who want grandma, who leads America, wants to reach out to the son of the Grand Mufti, who is a renegade, who wants an enlightenment of Islam. Well, how do you find peace when there's so much hate? I mean, how do you get past that? How do you get past the bigotries? There's, and I don't spare the language at all, but it's not gratuitous language. It's the worst kind of hatred and bigotry because it's matter of fact, because it's so part of the mainstream. You're not thinking about saying something to hurt or insult someone. That's who they are. And I thought, well, you have, as Sean was saying, when you have regular people standing up, people who, really don't want to do this, but at a certain point, they have no choice. They realize for some reason they're the heroes. They're the ones who have to take the lead. And you have to bring them together. And so baseball becomes the center of resistance to the American government. And baseball represents the old America, trying to get back to that in a good way. And you have the son, the Grand Mufti, instituting a civil war against his father, trying to stop the hatred, trying to scale back from Sharia, trying to bring more freedom there. But baseball is kind of the bridge to it. And when the main character, Puppy Nidak, who escapes to the Caliphate of England, and I don't have to tell you everything, but he starts the Caliphate Baseball Association. And so he gets a team of former POWs, American baseball players, who are kind of like in their 60s, not in shape anymore, but they have a score to settle, and they play baseball against an Islamic baseball team. But it sets off, it shakes up the system. And then when they're afraid to continue playing the Americans because the Americans are winning, people saying, "What are you afraid of?"
I love all the world building in this, and Janet, I wanted to bring you in on this as well, because when it comes to your writing process, are you creating your world first or your characters? I was kind of wondering what your creative process is like when you're diving into something like a dystopian futuristic tale.
I think I create the world first, and then I think what characters would fit in that world and maybe don't even fit in. For example, I think there's a conflict in the characters I created. One of the characters is called, his name is Kevin, and he's a comedian, and he's one of the chosen 5 to save the world, but he's very cynical. And that makes you think, like, why was he chosen? And that's part of the mystery, because we don't know until later why each one of them was chosen. But I thought if you put a character like that in a story like that, it's the end of the world, you have to save the world, but he's just a comedian, a cynical comedian, and he's one of the 5, then the character in that particular world will write itself.
Do you outline? Do you write an outline first before you dive in? Do you know more of the story up front and kind of let the story kind of take you along, or are you really kind of connecting to a character first and letting them kind of enter you into the world, bring you into the world?
I have a few backstories. I have reasons for everything that happens. For example, why the Universalists are in the rest of the world, but the Localists are just Canada. And the backstory is very particular, but I'm not even sharing that with the readers in the first book. But I am sharing hints to the mystery. There's a few backstories actually there. It's pretty complex, but the reader will always keep asking themselves, why is that planted here? What is she trying to tell me? And I think that creates suspense towards the next books.
Did you know you were writing a multi-series book when you got into this, or did you think you were going to kind of come to an end and realize, oh, I'm going to keep going with this in another book, or had you envisioned that from the beginning?
I actually shared an outline with my editor, Cheyenne Munavar, and when I shared the outline, she told me that it's not one book, it's going to be too long. So it will be a series.
Okay.
Yes. But I see it more as a TV series nowadays, because so many things are happening from the book in real life, that it's easier to do it as a TV show. Just, it's more depth. You write it quicker, because in my process, you need to write it and edit it and publish it and promote it. And it takes many, many years, like decades. Sure. It took me a decade to do it almost. Yeah, so I keep, and in a TV show, I think you can plant more clues, and because it stretches over time.
And I would like to ask Gary the same question. How do you approach writing about a world that's so far in the future, especially when we have no idea what it might really look like?
Well, I think that's what writers do, and that's what artists do. We're supposed to hold the beacon up. We're supposed to create, that's what people turn to us. And we have a great responsibility, and to do it right, and to do it honestly, and not to concede. There's so much of the woke mentality, and you dare not say this or that. And I'm just like, whatever. I'm very proud of the fact that I wrote 3 novels, 1,600 pages, about a war between the West and Islam, and only one person has ever accused me of Islamophobia. Nowadays, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially being Jewish, I could easily get, nailed for that, and I didn't, and because I had respect, and because I researched, and because I showed characters, all of them flawed, but I did it honestly, and I think that's really important. You can't expect to reach people if you're going to yell at them, and if you're going to minimize them, and if you're going to vilify them. I mean, that's what we have the news media for, and unfortunately our politicians for. We have to be more than that, and we always have been more than that, the artists, which is why it's been thousands of years. Things like theater, right? And stories. I mean, longer than that. I mean, really, look, at the end of the day, we're sitting around a campfire. It's where it all began, right? You build a fire, right? That's it. That's it. And so that's who we are, and we are entertainers.
And I had a question for both of you, and Gary, it's just kind of leading where you're going. Is I was wondering about your personal pasts or your family tree, or that if that really kind of bled into the story that you were telling, and it sounds like it did. Like a lot of your past, and you mentioned being Jewish and that kind of, and people not really calling you out for kind of centering around the Islamic world and treating characters correctly. I get that. But I wondered how much of your own personal background kind of led you wanting to tell this story, history, family, that kind of thing.
Very little. I mean, there's very little of me personally in here. Mm-hmm. In fact, the irony is there's almost no Jews in the trilogy because the first nation it destroyed is Israel. And then the Jews were blamed for the war, so they go underground. So it's really not until the final book, the third book, that there's actually a Jewish character. And, he has a small role. He's some significance, but other than that, in fact, there's very few white characters, main characters, because this is America in 2098. So that's going to be the face of America. Now, no one is viewed that way. There's two, in the book, 2 baseball greats from the past come back. Mickey Mantle and Ty Cobb. That's why it's been called like a dystopian field of dreams. Okay, but in the book, whoever you happen to be, it's not focused on. No one cares. I mean, you're gay, straight, black, white, unless in America, if you're Muslim, and if you're in the caliphate, you happen to be non-Muslim, a dhimmi. So I tried to show both. But for myself, I was always kind of impressed by the fact that there's very little of Gary in any of these characters.
Janet, that would be, I'd love to know from your point of view as well. When you're telling your story, do you find you're using your past or your history, or a lot of writers will tend to use fact and fiction and kind of bleed it together. Did you take from your past and background for your story?
Yeah, that's usually the motivation to my writing, not the stories themselves. I also don't have Jewish characters, but I grew up in the former Soviet Union, and so democracy and freedom of expression are very important to me, and I understand how society looks without that. So that's one of the ideas in Skykers, that freedom or the lack of. Also, I was kind of raised by my older sister, but also by my grandparents, because my parents worked a lot when I was growing up. My mom was a doctor in the emergency room, a pediatrician. My dad was an engineer, and he used to travel a lot. And my grandparents, the grandmothers were Holocaust survivors in Ukraine. I'm fully Jewish from all sides, and the grandfathers fought the Nazis with the Red Army. And what they were all telling me is that, it's part of your responsibility to make sure that there will be peace and tolerance and understanding in the future, because the world without it is very, very bad. My grandfathers were very brave and they have the war medals, but they told me, that the real bravery is not going to war and fighting it, but it's stopping that war. So everything I'm doing, from poetry to novels to script, is trying to convey that message.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I felt like. So that's why both of you write dystopian in order to try to bring more peace to this world, which is nowadays currently so confused and so.
Well,
there are so
especially
many.
seeing war too that close, and having that, and I have a lot of military background in my past, so I could see that, yeah, that would send people down on a path of peace. Once you experience that, yeah, you definitely want to realize that there's no future unless it's a peaceful one. We just can't seem to get a hold of that.
And I think as writers, we need to know that maybe the future will be a little bit tougher, but at the end it will be better, and there is lots of hope. And as long as there are people like us, meeting, discussing, talking about tolerance and about understanding, then the future will be bright and might be even brighter than it has ever been in the history of humanity. So it's up to us to keep that light.
Think how bad the world would have been without writers.
Horrible.
I can't even think about it.
No.
No. And actually, as we are talking about peace and changing things for the best, what is one key message, Gary, or emotion you hope your readers take away from this specific book?
That there is more that unites us than divides us. And there is possibility if we only have a little faith. And I'm not talking about faith in a religion and God, whatever, but faith in ourselves and faith in each other.
Yeah. Very well said.
Yeah, what do you think? How would Janet answer that question? I'm curious to know too.
I think the world is very fragile, but as long as we're making constructive conversations, we're engaged in constructive conversations, and we're talking about the future, and we're smiling and we're laughing and we're sharing humoristic stories and creating, then the world will be okay, and our literature will live on.
Well, and look, before we wrap up this panel, I think it's a good chance to give both of you I thank both of you for coming here, but also, where could we find your books? If you want to say a little bit about your novels or what's coming up for you, I'd love to just hear more about where we can find your work and what's on the horizon for you as well.
So Gary, please.
Oh, you can find my books at my publisher, bhcpress.com. And I've been working a lot on plays. And so, I've got readings set up. I take on social justice issues and flawed characters in that too. Trying to have people open their eyes and do what we're doing today, listen to each other. It's really, you could disagree as long as you're respectful, especially in these times. One of my heroes, Winston Churchill, said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. And we should remember that.
I wish we can get back to that, honestly. I hope
wouldn't that be
in
nice?
my lifetime.
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the way things have been lately, I understand that. Janet, how about you? Where could we find your work, and what do you have coming out? Maybe what's 2025 looking like for you as well?
This year I turned Skykers into a script. I wrote a pilot for a TV show, and it has been winning many international awards. Canadian Cinematography Awards, La Femme Award in LA, what else? The Mosaic International Film Festival Award. So I hope
Congratulations.
thank you so much. I really hope to maybe collaborate with producers and turn it into a TV show. So we'll see what the future holds. But in the meantime, you can find the book on Amazon, and on my website, there are links to the Amazon. And my website is author.janetkravetz.com.
You enjoy writing screenplays or novels more, or do you kind of go back and forth in between the two?
Back and forth right now, but it's very easy for me to write a screenplay. I'm very visual, and there's less words you use, and I do it very quickly.
That's good. And Gary, I hope you have something new in New York when I'm there.
So do I. Yes, I'm working on it. Yes.
Let us know.
Yes.
And yes, I would like to thank you very much, Gary Morgenstein and Janet Kravetz, for spending your time sharing your stories with us today. And yeah, hopefully we'll meet again and more success happen to both of you. And for those watching, if you like to learn more about today's guests and their books, of course, head over to our website at www.relatable-media.com. Stay tuned for our next panels, and thank you for watching Uncut with Lucia by worldauthors.org. Thank you. And thank you, Sean. Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure.